So it's now my pleasure to introduce our first plenary, Strengthening and Growing America's Economy. And at the end of this, we will have time, we're running a little bit behind time, but we will have time for a few questions, and someone will come out with a microphone for you to ask the question. Our moderator for this plenary is Tracy Jan. Tracy is the race and economics reporter at the Washington Post. So, Tracy, where are you? Back there? There. Oh, okay, there you are. I wondered when I looked around and I didn't find Ollie a while ago. It's back there. So let's give Tracy a big hand and she will introduce her panel. Thank you.
I feel like we're at a bar and we need some drinks.
Just taking orders.
I know.
This is great.
Thank you for being here today. My name is Tracy Jan at the Washington Post. This is Doug Holtz-Eakin. He is the president of the American Action Forum, and you all probably know the rest of his bio. Marya is right next to him. She is the vice president and chief administrative officer of Cummins. And Jeff Wasden is the president of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Pete Wiersma is the president of the Idaho Dairymen's Association. And it's not snowing in Idaho today, he told us, so he's happy to be here. Thank you very much. We'll get started. Doug, I was hoping you could address the fiscal impacts of immigrants to our economy. There's obviously been a lot of talk for the last several years, and it's heated up, especially under this administration. Are immigrants a net benefit to our economy? And I know it's a complicated picture, so I'll let you go.
Well, let me first just say thank you for the chance to be here today. This is a fantastic event. I'm an enormous fan of the National Immigration Forum and the work that it does, and I want to just echo everything that was said about the leadership provided by Senators Langford and Bennett. They are truly outstanding public servants, and it's been a pleasure to work with them. Now, that's a really hard question. So here's the right way to think about it. First and foremost, immigrants have a powerful positive impact on the U.S. economy. And there is, I think, a poorly appreciated fact that the native-born population in the United States has such low fertility that in the absence of immigration, we actually shrink. We'd be very much like Japan. We'd get older, we'd get smaller, our economy would be less powerful, we'd have less capacity to influence global affairs. So the flip side of that is that all of our choices about America's future greatness are choices about our immigration decisions. And that includes how fast will the labor force expand, what skills will it have, and as a result, how much will the economy produce. And that is the foundation of the ability to pay the bills at the federal level. You must have a rapidly growing, robust economy. It is true that we have big fiscal problems. In particular, I'm a former director of the Congressional Budget Office. It's my job in life to make you want to drink at breakfast. I'm about to do that. So, we have $1 trillion deficits next year, expanding as far as the eye can see. That's a very serious problem. Part of that is the fact that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security are programs that are running increasing amounts of red ink. Part of that is simply due to the fact that people are on those programs. And you hear a lot of complaints that, immigrants get on the social safety net and they cost us too much money. It has nothing to do with immigration. Those programs are poorly structured. If we had another baby boom, they'd run more red ink. That it has to do with the programs, not immigrants. So that myth has to be put aside. The one place where you get genuine pressures with more rapid immigration is at the state, and especially the localities, where you have to house, educate, and ensure the safety of the citizens. And so that's where the sort of tough stuff is. After that, what they contribute to the economy, what they pay in taxes, is nothing but a benefit.
Right. Before I get into the other questions, I'm glad you gave an intro. I was hoping the other panelists could do the same about how your current role and how your business relates to immigration.
Sure. Again, I'm Marya Rose. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of Cummins. For those of you who may not be intimately familiar with Cummins, we are a global power company headquartered in Columbus, Indiana, which is about 40 miles south of Indianapolis. Next year, we celebrate our 100th year. We have 55,000 employees around the world with manufacturing in China, India, Brazil, Mexico, Europe, Latin America. So for us, this is a big, big issue for us. So, and my responsibility, among many other things, is I have the pleasure of working with our Government Relations Office, which helps us tremendously around the world working on these issues.
Well, and I get the opportunity to work with amazing companies like Cummins. It's one of our business roundtable companies. First and foremost, thank you. I echo that comment. It was great to be here with Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado. I either get to say whatever he said earlier, or I'm here to clean up his mess that he left. I think he did okay. I think he's all right. You know, this issue is something that we've been working on as very intimate to the business community and inextricably linked to education, the workforce, human capital strategy, our ability to innovate and compete globally. It's just good business, and it makes good business sense for us to be involved in this particular issue. You know, we were chatting, and I was talking to a couple colleagues back in Denver about this week and what we were doing, and coming out here for leading the way, and all the work that we've done with Ali and the team here. And you just get this exasperated look, like, you know, we've been working on this issue forever. I know Carol Hildebrand back in Denver has been doing immigration issues for 30 plus years, and it's like, can we get to the finish line on this particular issue? And I think there's been a lot of missed opportunities. It kind of feels like the Broncos and immigration are kind of missing some opportunities to be successful and get across that goal line. So we're pretty optimistic, though, as you kind of heard the senators this morning. You know, Democrat and Republican coming together in divided Congress to sit down and actually start to work together and come up with the kind of pragmatic solutions that work, that are compassionate, just, and really help drive our economy forward. It can be done, and I think with all of your help, it will be done.
Pete?
Yeah, my name is Pete Wiersma. I'm president of Idaho Dairymen's Association. I am first and foremost a dairy farmer. And unlike Cummins, I have 18 employees.
It's close. It's close.
So HR is not usually a problem on my
Are they all
dairy.
related to you?
Yeah, we've been working on immigration as Idaho Dairymen's Association for over a decade. And it just begins to be a little frustrating that the need is there. It's obvious to me that America has always progressed because of immigration, but yet we can't seem to get our leaders to understand that or make progress on that point. So back on the farm and back in Idaho, we have lots of discussions about how we can move this, and so that's what Idaho Dairymen's Association is trying to do, and that's why our presence is, we're here today. So
Great.
Hopefully we can move the ball a little.
I wanted to get back to Marya for a second, and if you could jump in as well about being in red states and your corporate stances on immigration. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what you did with the DACA resolution?
Indiana's a red state.
It's not Colorado.
Yeah.
And how you go about the conversation.
So again, we are in southern Indiana, and Columbus is a town now of about 40,000 people. And so Columbus is the biggest employer in Columbus, Indiana, Cummins is. And so, you know, we have a lot of responsibility, we feel, to make the community a good place for everyone. And so as we thought about, especially our DACA employees, we think we have about 40 DACA employees, primarily in Columbus. And we want to keep them. They are valuable and treasured members of our company. And when we realized the impact that it was having on them personally, which was of course affecting their work, we wanted to make sure that we were in a position to do something to help them. But that wasn't the first time that we started a discussion around immigration. I mean, we have been talking about this issue since the 2000s. But what I would say is that because of the DACA issue for us, we became much more vocal than we had in the past. We were willing to be much more out there as a leader on this issue in Indiana. And it turns out, when you become a leader on this in a state like Indiana, other people step up. Other companies step up because there are lots of voices then. And so you're able to build a coalition now in Indiana. And once you've got a coalition of businesses that are affected by a problem such as this, then our local elected officials care very deeply about trying to help us solve it. So it ends up not really being a red or a blue, Democrat, Republican issue. It ends up being a business issue in the state of Indiana. And so when the business community comes together and tries to help resolve this problem, then we get our elected officials to listen to us, no matter which side of the aisle they sit on.
And nationally as well?
Nationally, yeah. What's your question, really? Yeah, it's been a bit more of a challenge nationally, certainly. You know, our vice president is from Columbus, Indiana, as some of you might know. He was our congressman, so our local congressman before he became governor and then obviously vice president. His brother is now our elected current congressman. And, you know, again, this is a business issue for us in Columbus, and I think, you know, the rhetoric around it is a little bit different than needs to happen, of course. But the business issue for us is the one that remains the most important thing. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Pete, would you like to weigh in on that?
You know, I don't know how familiar you are with Idaho, but it's about the reddest of the red states that you can probably find. So it seems a little bit incongruous, I guess. But it's also an agricultural state. Agriculture is king there. Actually, dairy products are the number one dairy product. Potatoes, believe it or not, are second to dairy. But anyway, agriculture depends heavily on immigrant labor. We can't, in the dairy business especially, we can't have a day or two where our employees don't show up. We would be out of business. I know Washington, D.C. is not really a hotbed of dairy activity, and there's not a lot of cows around this town, but physiologically, a cow has to be milked at least twice a day. We do ours 3 times a day, and you cannot skip. You can't skip them a day. You can't skip them certainly 2 days, because their body tells them to stop producing, and they don't bounce back. So we literally have no time, and we have no wiggle room to be without employees. So the grain growers and the other areas of agriculture may have a little bit more of a cushion there, but those workers are vital to all of our products. And so it is an economic issue. And I won't say Idaho is a religious state, but there are many people of faith, as there are, I'm sure, all over. And that weighs in really heavily, too. Some of my employees I've had for, well, close to 20 years, some of them. So I saw their kids grow up. They saw my kids grow up. One gentleman I'm thinking of, his name is Javier. He's about 5'5". My son, he was around when my son was born. My son is now 6'4" and weighs about 230 pounds. And every time my son walks through the milking parlor, Javier goes, "Michael, what happened?" And so my point is that they're almost extended family for us. And I think there's a real moral issue, not just for me, but shared by our allied industries, that we owe these people. They've helped us build our businesses. They've helped us get to where we are today. And I think it's a very serious moral issue if we can't find a way for these people to become secure in their residence here in the States and to continue to help us. So.
Speaking more broadly, how does the dairy industry differ from the rest of the agriculture industry in terms of visas and the challenges that you have in getting workers?
Yeah, there is no visa program for the dairy industry. There's an H-2A program, which is for seasonal workers. They come into the country, and they during the growing season, and then they have to go back home. And next year they can come back again, and that I think works pretty well for the growers who use that. But the dairy industry, there is no a visa program because it's year-round. So it's actually illegal for us to use any employees from the, under the H-2A program. So we really have no visa program at all. We just, we hire, we check all their we fill out the I-9 forms, we see all the documentation. So in that regard, we're okay usually. We never want an I-9 audit because if you fill it out wrong, you can get slapped pretty heavy with a fine. But as far as we can tell with the documentation, they're here legally, but we know that that's not always the case.
Do you use E-Verify at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
Can you talk a little bit about whether that's come up in your state? I know it's not one of the mandatory states. So is there any incentive to use it?
Well, I think it'd be a good program, but it can't, I guess what I say is it can't really be a hard start because if our employees don't qualify immediately, technically we could lose them. And obviously, as I explained before, we can't lose employees. And also those few who would take advantage of it, it would work okay for them, but there are many, many more who probably would be afraid to take advantage of that, and they would be almost, for the lack of a better term, kind of stuck at their job, would be unable to better themselves just because they're kind of held captive by the fear of putting themselves into the system.
Right.
So,
and I've heard from businesses who, think if it's not a national mandate, there are competitive disadvantages to some to use it. Jeff, could you address this at all? Is this something that you see happening in the future, given that the president had spoken forcefully about this during the campaign, not so much recently?
E-Verify, I think, is one of the key tenets that has certainly been part of the platform of immigration, if you can call it that. I think that the ideas around immigration reform, to call it, a concerted effort or a well thought out or well planned effort, I think we've been using executive order from the previous administration, the current administration, to try and really do what Congress should be doing. And that's really the role and responsibility of Congress. And Congress's inability to act on this particular issue has kind of forced the hands of some of the presidents, which has created some ill thought out policies, which has created some overreach. I think there are some key tenets that the Business Roundtable focuses on when you look at the immigration issue, and certainly they fit very well in line with the Immigration Forum, with business valuables and badges and the coalitions that are trying to drive reform forward. Right? We need to deal with the broken legal immigration system, right, and remove the magnet and the pull for those to break the law. We shouldn't have people waiting 10, 12 plus years to try and become legal status here. We need to expedite that process. We need to get the red tape out of the way. When you heard the senator talking about the wall earlier and security, there are better ways than, as he mentioned, the 16th century technology. We are pretty well advanced in the Business Roundtable with tech companies and lasers and drones and sighting, and there's a lot of ways that we can, I think, do border security. But to us, it's a community safety issue, which is why it's more important, right? People want to feel safe in their community. They want to feel respected within their community. We look at this just good business, right? When you sit back and you really start to say, why does the Business Roundtable care about immigration writ large? What is the rule? It is good business. We're in a global economy. The companies of the Business Roundtable, global by nature. You heard from Cummins here. You don't become a Fortune 200 company and be part of the Business Roundtable if you don't extend that border and understand that 87% of the world's purchasing power is outside of the U.S. borders, 95% of the population base is outside of the U.S. borders. It's good business. We're global. We're hyper-competitive. I think we're stuck in a mindset where we think good ideas come from Americans, and we forget the diversity of thought and the benefits and the contributions from so many immigrants across this country, and why it's so important that we create a welcoming environment. When we are here in institutions of higher ed, bringing some of the amazing kids and talent across this globe, We educate them in our schools, and then we're forced to send them back to compete against some of the very companies that they could be driving innovation and those companies forward to be competitive. It's really something that we need to really step back and kind of pump the brakes a little bit, take a pause, and figure out what is it America wants to be known for? Where does that mantle of leadership reside? How do we start to come up with the kind of solutions that really put America back in the forefront of a global leader, not only on areas of immigration, but competitiveness and really kind of driving the kind of pragmatic, thoughtful, compassionate, just solutions forward. And we're losing that right now. I think it's something we need to get our arms around.
Thank you. And it's a very complicated issue because everyone has their own, interest, right? With the skilled visas, it's a different segment than agriculture, and then student visas allowing students to stay after graduating. I was wondering, Doug, if you could talk about how the Republican Party's views have shifted on this, or has it always been diverse in terms of different opinions on how to deal with immigration, legal and illegal?
My comfort in speaking for the entire Republican Party has diminished recently. No, it's always been an issue that has divided the party, not just, because it's not really a partisan issue. There are just elements of both the Democratic and Republican Party who believe fundamentally that it is our mission to further the cause of democracy and freedom, that immigration is a central part of that. We are a nation of immigrants, and that service of the country rises above the party, and that's been exemplified by my old boss, John McCain, and others over the years. That was the Ronald Reagan vision for immigration. That's the Speaker Ryan vision of immigration. But that vision often is pitted against a vision which is really a vision of fear, and which is really colored by a fear of not being able to compete internationally, a fear of not having their religious values preserved, a fear of having their social fabric rent. And that's been in the party for a long, long time. And I think the central mission of this moment is to recognize that we cannot let the politics of fear dominate this discussion. They have come to. And I view that as a failure on the part of people like me who know better, but certainly something that is not good for our country and that we have to fix. And it's not just within the Republican Party. This is present across the spectrum.
Right. The economy is doing well, unemployment is low, there's very high need for labor. How does that fit in with not having enough people to fill them, and that contradicts the rhetoric of preventing people from coming here? There's even divisions cast between different minority groups, like, oh, they're going to come and take your jobs. And in some cases, it does lower wages. So, all the nuances are there. When E-Verify was introduced as a mandate in Arizona, researchers have found that by using E-Verify, wages did go up for native-born Hispanic males, and as well as African Americans. And so how do you deal with that?
I'm going to try to avoid giving an economics lecture here, but there are a couple of things that just need to get sort of, I think, settled in this debate. First is we need to design a core visa-granting legal immigration system of which we are proud and supportive for the 21st century. And it shouldn't be about the moment. It's great that the economy is booming right now. It's great the unemployment rate's down at under 4%. It's a remarkable thing to have more openings than unemployed people. It's not always going to be that way. We should have a visa system that we're proud of in other circumstances as well. And so I worry about the people who want to do this in the politics of the moment. No, let's make the case over the long term. And over the long term, the evidence is overwhelming that it is not the case that immigrants are taking the native-born's jobs. Far from it. In places where you have a higher fraction of immigration, you see better employment rates among the native-born, not the reverse. They don't lower wages. They do different things, they have different skill sets, tend to raise the wages of the native-born on average through immigration. They are extraordinarily hardworking. Immigrants have higher labor force participation, they retire later, they work longer hours. They start more small businesses, about 20% of the immigrant population versus 15 of native-born, and 40% of our Fortune 500 companies came from immigrants, first or second generation. I mean, this is nothing but a good story for America, and that's true whether the unemployment rate is 3.7 or 6.7. And I think we have to focus on that. We've lost sight of that.
So what happened? Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think to your point, I think if you go look at Alabama, if I'm getting the right states there, right, some laws that were passed there that really tried to create an Alabama first, right, on the hiring side with this fear-mongering going on that immigrants were taking the jobs of unemployed Alabamans and wages were being compressed and they were having a negative impact. And if you go back and look at the studies and the results of where Alabama went, what happened to their GDP and the consumption taxes and wages and things, it tells a very different story. It does tell exactly what you referenced, that they're actually a boon to society, that creating those jobs, that H-1B visas, that they actually have a multiplier effect and great for the community. When you look at this particular issue around immigration, we talked about this on the Republican side a lot. Arthur Brooks at AEI did a thing called the compassionate heart, right? How do we talk to the immigrant community? When you look at the immigrant community writ large, their family, they're risk takers, they're entrepreneurs, they're hard workers, all the things that we should be valuing as a society. That's not a left-right thing. When Senator Bennett was talking about the Colorado Compact, it was Republican business organizations that stepped to the table first. It said, this is something that we believe in that needs to be done. It's the right thing to do. And as you talked about coalition building, the right ideas, the right principles, people will come to the table, they'll step out of their lanes, they will take risk, and they will stand up and say it is good for our community, it's good for our business, it's good for our state, it's good for our nation to lead on this particular issue. And those are the things that we want to continue to advance and hopefully work for in this 2019 new Congress.
Marya, can you talk about whether you've had increased trouble filling positions at Cummins in recent years?
Yes, so of our professional workforce, or not our salaried workforce, it is primarily engineers. So we need people who are in the STEM field. So most of them are engineers. And as we know, it is difficult to find engineers in the United States because of the talent shortage, frankly. And so if you think about Purdue University, which is just up the road from us, about 50% of their master's students and 75% of their PhD students in engineering are non-US born persons. So we need them. We want them to come to Cummins. And if we have a difficult time getting them visas, then we lose that talent. They go somewhere else. Now, we might be able to hire them in India or China or somewhere else, but the point is we want them to stay here in Indiana and contribute not just to Cummins, but to the Indiana economy. And so that is, it is maddening. It is maddening that you have people that you want and you cannot keep there. What's interesting to us is that this immigration discussion is very much tied to the global trade discussion. And if you think about the idea of nationalism, and for us, we need global trade as well. So we've got a plant in Seymour, Indiana that exists because we can ship that product outside the United States. So the idea that you've got, not only immigration can't have people here, but we would actually have to ship jobs, U.S. jobs outside the United States. Whoops. To make, to make that.
Excited.
I know, I'm sorry. It's like, so that you cannot separate those two discussions, I believe. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse on trade for a minute.
You're doing great.
Okay.
You want to talk about how this is affecting you as well?
Repeat the question.
Have things gotten more
Sorry.
difficult I know it's always hard to get labor, but just in the last 2 years, have things been more difficult for you as well as your other colleagues?
We would, in years past, we would get multiple applications a week. And if I get one a month, that's quite something. And I do want to kind of, there's a myth out there that we hire undocumented workers. Number one, we don't do that intentionally, like I explained with the documentation, that we check all documentation. But we do that, we hire undocumented workers so that we can get cheap labor. That is a myth, and nobody in this room believes that, but it's not true, because there are other introductory industries. There's the construction industry, you name it. So we have to compete with.
Chobani and Cliff Bar came into Idaho and drove wages right up. You'd rather go work indoors at Chobani and Cliff Bar or work outside and
Yeah, exactly.
Nature.
Yeah.
We have, and the
It's all cold
the jobs that we have on our dairies are not easy jobs. You're subject to weather, dust. The work ethic that they demonstrate is just awesome. They can, but if they have to work with me, they don't like it because I'm too old and slow. They want to get the job done. But we don't pay them. We have to pay them what the market will bear.
Which is what? What do you pay?
They start about $13 an hour, and my highest one is about 16.
Right.
That's about the range there that they get paid. And they're happy. I have a lot of women milkers, because they found now as their kids have gotten older and in school, they can also supplement their family income by milking cows. So their husband will milk cows at one dairy, and the wife will milk cows at another dairy. I've had them apply together before, and I said, well, I'm not real comfortable with that, because if you guys ever have a fight, maybe I'd be out of an employee. So, but it's definitely gotten harder for us to find employees. I have a friend. Idaho dairy industry is very small in numbers. There's only about 496 dairies, but we produce 10 million pounds of milk, 10 billion pounds of milk a year. So we all know each other more or less. And I have a friend. He's 20 employees short, and their particular dairy milked several thousand cows, and so it's not even an economic issue. It's an animal welfare issue, because we really need to take care of these animals. And if you're short-handed, it gets really tough. So it's a problem on a lot of fronts.
So what happens when people are short? Do they increase wages? Are there locals who will do it for a certain price?
He's increased wages. There just isn't anybody.
Is it because they're too old or too lazy, or there's not enough people? They already have jobs.
I think that everybody who is employable is employed. I think that the small number that is not, and I'm just talking about people in general. I think that they're for health reasons or poor personal choices or whatever. They're just not employable. But otherwise, we're at full employment and still lacking. So. And wages doesn't. I mean, you can raise wages, but if there's no people, it just doesn't happen.
So this is not the type of job that people would move to Idaho to work for $30 an hour. That's the argument that people say. I was in Denver last year with a small landscaping company. We actually went to Juarez for H-2B workers when they finally arrived, because they didn't get their visas their first time. And they came with, I don't remember, I think it was like 80 some people. This was towards the end of the season. They had to let a lot of, they had to turn down a lot of contracts. They lost a lot of money. By the time we got took the bus and got to Denver, it was, I think, late August. And other folks and he was paying them $14, $15 an hour, not minimum wage. And other folks were saying, well, if you just paid them $30, $40, then there'd be people who would do those jobs. I was out there with them. It's backbreaking labor. So what is your response, or any of you response to?
Well, I'll respond to it. In the dairy industry, we cannot pass costs on to the consumer. It's impossible for us. Our milk goes off the dairy, it's gone, it's processed, it's consumed before we ever get a milk check, and then there's a formula that the federal government kind of sets, and then the processor, in my case, they'll measure components in the milk, quality and such, and then they'll say, here you go. And there's no mechanism for me to pass anything on. This is why, we in the dairy industry, we don't like to look like we have our heels dug in, but every time there's a mandate from one of our customers, being a Walmart or a retailer, that, okay, you guys really, our customers are really sensitive about animal welfare. You need to do this. Well, it's going to cost us money, which is fine. We want to do what the customer wants, but we don't get a return on that, and it's a real problem in the dairy industry, and it's that avenues of agriculture. I don't know how their mechanisms work.
Customers won't pay for what they say they
Well,
want.
we can't even charge them. It just doesn't, there's no mechanism for that, so.
We like paying $1.99 for
Well-
milk for
Yeah,
a
we
gallon.
do, yeah.
King Super's on sale most
Right.
of the time. It's a good thing. I think the one thing, we could call this the Debunking Myth panel right here. We're talking about wages, and I think people that are understanding or myth out there that's so misguided that these are low-paying jobs, that you're trying to use immigrant labor to undercut the market, that they're taking American jobs. You know, you mentioned the engineers, and I think that's one thing in the diversification of the Colorado economy. Aerospace, medical devices, healthcare, technology, engineering, right? They're highly skilled jobs. They're jobs, the value of a job, the importance of labor and filling those jobs to the company and individuals across the spectrum, across industry is what's important. And we need to continue to find the right kind of policies that drive those, whether you're in hospitality, whether you're in the ag farming community, or whether you're in the engineering, high-tech, highly skilled jobs.
Doug, you wanted to jump
Yeah,
in?
no, I mean, I don't run a business, and I'm the nerd on the panel, and I look at the numbers, and it's remarkable how much of this pulling people into the labor force we have done. I mean, it has essentially run its course. If we had people sticking with their original choices to work or not work, so the labor force participation rate was about the same, we could create about 100,000 jobs a month, 90 to 100, depends on how you do the math. We've been creating over 200,000 for month after month after month. People are coming out who have not worked in a long time. It's a fantastic thing. But it can't go on forever. I mean, we are literally running out of opportunities to do that. And the notion that somehow businesses aren't paying higher wages is just wrong. If you look carefully at good measures of typical compensation, benefits plus cash, they're rising at 3% a year now, and they're double what they were 3 years ago. So all of the things that are supposed to happen are actually happening out there. It's just not enough.
It's not enough because they're.
We're out of bodies.
And what about the people? I mean, this is getting a little bit beyond immigration, but I'm just curious how you would address folks who feel underemployed. They have jobs, but they feel like they don't have enough to make ends meet on a month-to-month basis. Where do they go? Do they just have to work multiple jobs to?
Many do that. In the end, there's every month the government puts out a fantastic advertisement for the importance of education. It's called the monthly employment report, and the unemployment rate among the college educated is under 3%, and the pay in that area is phenomenal. And what you find typically in people who are struggling is they don't really have the skills that they would like to have, that employers would like to have, and that's the missing link right now. And it goes back to your problem. Where do you find people with skills? Well, often we have them and we're telling them they can't work here, and that's just a mistake.
So politically, where do we go from here? If all of you or anyone who wants to jump in first could address, with the new balance of power in Congress changing, is it going to be more gridlock on these issues, or is there actually hope that some sort of compromise could be met to at least address one of these many different immigration issues?
I thought I was probably the most optimistic guy until I met Ali. I think we probably share the optimism around this issue, right? Every year we're going to get this done, and we're pretty excited about the new Congress and the new opportunity. It comes back to these patchwork policies and knee-jerk reactions and ill thought out. When you start looking at the march coming to the southern border right now, right? If we don't have the right policies in place to address these kinds of issues, we end up sending troops, and the hysteria mounts. When you start dealing with DACA, right? These are policy issues. This is a role of Congress. Congress needs to man up. They need to sit down in the room. We need to lock them in the room. We need to not let them out. We need to tell them they need to fix the problem. Because the reality is, on both sides of this issue, every member in Congress, R&D, agrees with about 90% of this particular issue, and we've talked about that. You can sit down with the two senators that were sitting up here, R&D, two different states, and they agree on how we can fix immigration today. We need leadership to be able to allow some of these bills to come forward. We need to sit down. We need to start to do that. We need to hold them accountable from the business community because it impacts us. It impacts the companies of the Business Roundtable. Each of you need to hold them all accountable, not only at the election, at the ballot box, but certainly as they come back into town halls and we have these discussions. But it's a lot of signaling and messaging too, and I think we've put out a lot of mixed signals around this. I think we can do a better job, all of us, on this issue, but I am still optimistic.
So, I think one of the issues is that this idea of the language that we're using to talk about this, this can't be an us versus them discussion. No longer us versus, it's all us. It's all us. We're all in this together. And until we stop using that language and talking about, even, in the trade issue, us versus them, we're never going to advance the ball, because there may be people in Congress, and I believe there are, who are willing to do it. The problem is the rhetoric out there. The rhetoric out there is always us versus them, and they have people who vote for them, who care deeply about that. And it is all of our responsibility to help try to change that rhetoric.
That zero-sum game mentality
Yes, exactly.
that comes
Right.
into immigration.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's certainly not zero-sum. That's absolutely important to remember that. And I'm a crazy optimist, so yes, this is an opportunity. We did polling a little while back of conservatives planning to vote in Republican primaries, and asked them, is the system broken? Yes. Should Congress fix it? Yes, not the executive. Policy by policy. Do you support a path to legal status? Yes. I mean, so on the substance of the issue, the American people understand and want it fixed. We're now in a position, we have a new Congress. It's got Democrats controlling the House, Republicans controlling the Senate. That has the following tremendous advantage. Legislation that gets passed and is not perfect in the eyes of any beholder, they get to blame the other guys. So that's good.
Right.
If you own the whole thing, it's very hard, right? So now that, and now we just need, bluntly, White House leadership to get this done. And that's been a missing element. We need to get it.
Rhetorically, they say, the president is supportive of certain elements of it. So what is the problem?
What is the problem?
What is it?
Marya?
I'm not touching that one.
I just asked a question.
I'm going to go resign my job. I'll be right back.
Let's get those two senators back up here quickly.
No, I put the personalities aside. The White House has a central role in big reforms. Only the White House can go to the other side and say, I know it's important to you, it'll be in there or I won't sign. No one else has that capability. Only the White House can go to their own side and say, I get it, you don't like this, it's a bad vote, I'll sponsor your turtle migration bill, whatever it might be. They can do those things. So you don't get it done without the White House. So I'm just watching, right? They have to make a decision. The people want it to get fixed. So they have to make that decision.
There are definitely some lessons you can learn from this last election, right? If you look at that, and I think President Trump ran on immigration because he thought it was a winning issue. If you go across congressional races, you see a lot of hardliners on the right that campaign on immigration that were putting out some very harsh rhetoric. Many of those were not successful and are looking for work now, and maybe they can come up to Idaho and... No. You don't think they work hard enough? Okay. All right, I'll let you answer that one.
I have the phone number of a congressman who's looking. He just told me.
They send them my way.
As you look at that, though, right, what was the message and what were people in those districts being told to their congressional delegation about the type of representation they expected and demanded from those members of Congress? And I think, you need to step back as an organization. We all need to step back and start to evaluate that. In Colorado, we had a congressional seat flip. Congressman Mike Hoffman, who was actually very good on Republican issues around immigration. But, he got called out by the president, of course, on Fox News for not being great on immigration and not backing him, and that was the reason why he said he lost, but forgot the other 18, 20 people that lost because they were campaigning on this issue. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, the accountability is there if we're willing to step up and hold them accountable and demand the kind of leadership on this issue to get this done.
Marya, did you want to add anything
No.
to that?
Thank you for
got you in
asking.
enough trouble.
Yes, thank you for
No
asking.
politics coming out of Cummins. Yes, good answer.
Yeah.
Before we move to audience questions, would any of you want to close out with anything else?
Well, Idaho's a small state, so we have a small congressional delegation, and they all have ranching and farming background, so it's very easy for us to communicate with them on this issue. They understand the issue well. They hold the line for us very well, but they also are politicians, and they say, yeah, you know, we can do this. If we can do this, if we could just get the other side to go here. I'm kind of a cynic by nature, and after this has been going on so long, it's hard not to be even more cynical and say, yeah, you know, we're going to be in this for a while. But you have to have hope, and we have to turn hearts, and we have to show people that this is not really about things and ideas, and it's about people, and it's about people who have helped us get to where we're at. And you know, if you think of the story, some of these people work really hard in really uncomfortable positions, but most of us here, if you think back to your grandparents or your great-grandparents, they did that work as well. That's what they did. That's what it took to make it. And we're here in our situations because they did that. The current immigrant labor force is doing what our grandparents and great-grandparents did. They're just at a different spectrum. So I think sometimes there's a lot of guilt out there that, well, we're so affluent and these poor people are working so hard. But it's where they're at, and they're not feeling sorry for themselves. They're willing to work, just get out there and work. So anyway, I think I think our leaders really need to start thinking with their hearts. If we're a moral nation and we have a moral conscience, I think that they have to show that. So.
That's a great comment. And you know, it goes back to, I really think, the future of work, right? When you start to step back and look at how technology is driving changes in this new economy and augmentation and automation, some of these jobs are going to be converted and flipped, and that doesn't impact immigrants, it impacts the workforce writ large, and it impacts the question you raised earlier about upskilling and jobs and training. And that's why I think as a policy organization, the Business Roundtable is, right? We want to step back, we want to look at that and understand that we need to put forth the right kinds of policies that will not only keep us relevant and successful and innovative and competitive for all of our companies, but certainly looking around the corner where we're heading with this workforce issue. How do we continue to think about your job, your profession? Cows are going to need to be milked twice a day in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years.
Yeah.
And where does that labor come from, and what does technology do to drive that change today? And I think those are the things that keep many of us up a lot at night, maybe too much at night.
So this is not a theoretical discussion. This is about real people and real lives. And I have two colleagues who are here with me today. They don't know I'm calling them out right now. Uriel Lopez and Edgar Hernandez, just say hi, wave hi, so who are personally affected by what's going on in Washington. And we are taking them up to the Hill this afternoon so they can personally tell their story to the people who need to hear it. So first of all, I'm very grateful to the two of them for joining us today. But if we cannot put faces to this issue, then it will not be real for many people. So that's really important.
I'm the last person who should close this discussion. I mean, we are a moral nation. We are a nation with a proud tradition in immigration and a commitment to freedom and democracy. But in the moment, one of the things that I think we forget is we're a nation that wasn't doing very well. We had people who worked full-time, year-round, and never saw a raise for a long, long time. And there was a deep frustration that came from that. And this is not a threat to doing better. This is how we do better. And that needs to be remembered. It's not the greatest piece of evidence, but in 2017, I organized a letter to the President and the leadership of Congress in support of immigration reform, in support of better immigration policy, because I was worried about the quality of the discussion and the tenor of the discussion. And you know, I asked the basically America's economists to sign on, regardless of party or ideology, and I don't have that many friends. I'm sure that's pretty clear. We got like 1,500 people signed up in a heartbeat. This is a no-brainer, and really we need to get the ball moving forward. And if we do that and people stand up, then the fear will go away when we get this done.
Thank you so much to all of you. I want to open this up to audience questions because you probably have much more interesting questions than I do. So yeah. He will be the king. Yes.
My name It's Lawrence Romo, and I want to thank you all for being here today for an important topic of immigration. I am the National Commander for the American GI Forum, the largest Hispanic, primarily veterans service organization in the United States. And myself and Octavio Hinojosa here are working on many issues in regards to immigration. A lot of immigrants, to enhance their lives, they join the military. Non-citizens, as long as you have status, and we had a program called MONVI that's going to hopefully come back again. And MONVI is for people that had STEM talents, language skills. The military let them in as long as they had status, including DACA people. The problem we have is a lot of them got citizenship once they got in the military, and they got it expedited, and we're going to try to get that back. But the biggest problem and issue we have that we need your help on, it's a travesty and immoral for this country and unpatriotic for our veterans that created some crimes to be deported. If they got DUI or they had marijuana charges, nonviolent crimes, we want to pass a bill this time. We're working with community-based organizations and veteran service organizations to have legislation passed to bring these people home. We say to leave no one behind, but this country has left these people behind. It's inexcusable and unconscionable for this to happen. So we need your help to bring these deported veterans home, period. No ands, ifs, buts about it. And the ones who are being threatened for deportation, we need to make sure that they don't get deported. Let them serve their punishment. Now, where we draw the line is if they did a violent crime, they probably need to be, we got to have a compromise there somewhere. But I appreciate your discussion on that and see what you think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does someone have a question? Yes. Do you want to go over? Oh.
I'm Nathan Hedge. I pastor a small church in Oklahoma City, and checked, Marya, as you were talking, there is a Cummins location there, and so I have a question for how to build those coalitions. Mm-hmm. What can I, as a small local pastor, say to an HR person or someone that I would talk to at a business that would open the door for building that coalition so they know that I'm not we were talking last night about Christian militia, I'm not gonna do any of that. So how do I kind of lower the defenses and let them know that we're available to partner with?
Give me your telephone number and I will let the distributor know. No, we need everyone in this discussion. And I am very pleased about the number of faith-based organizations and police organizations that are part of this group, because this is not, this is not an issue that is right or left, religious or not. This is about, who we are as a nation. And I think for us, building those coalitions, no matter what the issue is, the more people that are in it, the louder and stronger our voices are. So I really appreciate your leadership in your community on this issue. Without people like you, this never is going to change. We're never going to change the rhetoric around it. So thank you. And I will give you my card.
And I would make one suggestion. I've been talking about this issue for 2 decades now, and a lot of us know a lot about the policies. We know a lot about how it affects business. We know a lot about things, and the temptation is to tell people. Right. Tell people, this is what should happen. This is the right thing. This is the good thing. I just did it, right, for an hour, right? So don't do that.
But you were asked.
Ask them what they're afraid of. Ask them what they're worried about. Be curious about their fears. They're usually misplaced, but if you take the time to ask first, it's a better way to build the coalition. The conversation goes better.
Doug. Mr. Wasden commented on this a little bit right at the end, but I was wondering if we could all talk about a little bit about the automation issues. So we've seen a lot of folks that are more on the restrictionist side on immigration say that the real answer to this is that we need to automate, whether it's the answer for new technologies in milking or new cropping techniques, but we've also seen, and theoretically we've seen some of that play out where the minimum wage was increased in certain cities in the country, and now we're ordering our fast food through machines instead of through people. So how does automation play into this conversation? And is that part of the solution to the lack of workers that are currently available in the United States? And what kind of impact does that have also on our native-born workers?
Great question.
Well, it's interesting when you think about that particular issue, and I've seen a lot of charts that list the jobs most likely to be automated, and I will tell you, I've looked at those very closely, and I've never seen a policy guy on that list ever. So
That's because we make the list.
people like us are generally fairly safe from automation. I think I've got a job next week. It's great. It's good. The challenge around that, and again, that's why we try and sit back, and you've got to be more holistic in your view, and you've got to look at things, right? You talked about, Purdue University engineers, a very direct need, and how do we keep that talent, right? But what happens when those same very jobs are outsourced and automated, and you start to have the different kind of voids and needs? There will be jobs that will never be automated, that will continue in perpetuity. I think as we sit back as policymakers, as leaders, and start to evaluate the landscape, the work, it ties into, I think, everything that, how linked everything is when you start looking at institutions of education, right? The right kind of skilling and upskilling that happens, the remedial work, the kind of employee that we're really looking for to continue to drive and innovate our companies forward. And I think that's part of the challenge as you look at this exponential wave of technology and its impact, but it hasn't lessened the demand of these types of jobs that you're hearing. You've got two people on either side of me that are struggling to find work in the era of automation in this fourth industrial revolution. It will continue in the fifth and the sixth. So while that is going to have a profound impact on how people and companies do business, you still have that human capital strategy. And if as a company and as an organization, that human capital is the number one issue that helps drive your company and helps keep you relevant, competitive, and innovative, we can't forget that or lose sight of that. And those ideas will come, again, across the globe. That diversity of talent, the diversity of thought, the diversity of ideas, the contributions that we get from competing thoughts and ideas and cultures is what really, I think, champions our companies and what's drive us forward versus this monolithic single view. And so, I'll turn to either of you two. You're seeing automation on both ends.
It's a red herring. Automation is inevitable. It is inevitable that it will happen. So our lines are highly automated, and yet we need many people still standing there to help do that technical work. So there is no way that you can fully automate an engine assembly line. You just can't do it. And so that it will help. It will help with the labor shortage. But we're in we've got an escalating problem. It's not getting smaller. So labor, the need to have labor, no matter what the skill set is, it will still be there. We won't lose that need.
Yeah, believe it or not, automation in the dairy industry is a consequence of the lack of labor. It's extremely expensive for just a family farmer to put in any kind of automation. They do have robotic milkers for cows, and people are looking at those because they can't find workers. But as I mentioned before, and don't feel bad for me, I'm a price taker, as is our most in agriculture. So once again, we can't pass that cost on to anybody. It's strictly a cost for us, or a decision on how much can I do, how much of the work can I do myself if I don't have these workers. And so it's almost a forced issue for some people. I've talked to my accountant and my banker several times about it, and they say it's just not there cost-wise yet. You can't make it work. So I'm not going to do it. But it's a consequence because of the lack of labor, and it's money I don't want to spend. I'd much rather spend it on people. And people, generally, if they're cow people, they do a good enough job. I don't need a robot to do that.
I think the final point to that, right, is as you said, put that into people, right? Because the consumption tax from these individuals in the community, they're going down, that are shopping at the local restaurants, that are going to the movie theaters, that are going out and buying school supplies for their kids, is the benefit. And maybe they'll have currency for robots maybe in the future, but I don't see that coming anytime soon.
Beyond my pay grade.
Yes, Mark Finney. I work with World Relief in Spokane doing refugee resettlement. We also do employment services, so I work with over 100 employers in our city. I'm curious what you would say if we chose not to be optimistic and said for the next few years we could realistically expect that the immigration issue won't get solved. In fact, it might even get worse, and we might see an intensity of anti-immigrant rhetoric. What would the consequences be? And could some sort of crisis related to workforce where industries start closing or going offshore, could that be a catalyst that in a few years could force this issue more strongly than what we see now with a strong economy?
Well, we have the ability to shift production outside of the United States. And, the trade issue obviously hurts us. But, not all of our product is sold in the United States. We sell product everywhere. And so to the extent that we need to, we have engines manufactured in Seymour that are going to India and China, it will be expensive, but we could do it. We do not want to do it. We do not want to do it because our plant in Indiana is fantastic. We want to keep it here, but if we can't continue to get talent to do the work here, we will be forced to make that change. And that, I think, is the really sad piece of this discussion, that, that companies, 100-year-old companies in Indiana can't do business in the United States.
I think that goes back to her point earlier, right, about how linked trade is, right? And I go again, I mentioned education, right? The Business Roundtable, the top issues, we survey our CEOs every quarter, and for years it was labor issues, it was tax policy, it was regulatory issues. Right now it's human capital, right? And you start to look at how that issue, how trade, how workforce, how education has all risen to the top instead of worrying about the labor pressures and regulatory and taxing issues that are driving us, and how linked every one of those are. And it does matter to those companies where the ability to offsource the plants, the factories, the workforce, to change that narrative. We can't keep the workforce here. You can do production off-site. We're not welcoming as a nation, as a culture, as a society to really encouraging the American workforce to be open to the diversity of the thoughts and ideas and the contributions of all. You're going to probably see some of that in the future.
I'm already hearing from people who used to come here people don't even want to come here for college anymore. Right. They're afraid they're going to get shot. They're afraid they won't have a job afterwards when they graduate. They're going to Canada. They're going to other countries that are welcoming them and giving them more economic opportunity.
Who pays the highest tuition at a higher ed institution?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's going to have an impact, the ripple that you're talking about.
It already
will
is,
start to play.
So your scenario is an enormous missed opportunity. I mean, we have this near-term economic boom, 2018, 2019 in my forecast, all quite good, but that should not disguise the fact that the core problem we had was that the standard of living that used to double every 35 years, one working career, is now doubling every 70 years. 2 working careers going over the horizon. That's losing access to the American dream for a lot of families. That's the core problem. That has to be fixed. This could be part of fixing that. If we don't, then we have missed, I think, our obligation to the next generation and a huge opportunity for every American. So I'm quite worried about that. I think that is not an unrealistic scenario, and we don't have everything in place to generate the kind of vitality that we benefited from in the post-war era, and which immigration was a big part of. We need that.
We have time for one more question. Yes, woman in the gray dress.
Hi, my name is Lori Francis. I'm the Director of Missions at the Summit Church in Raleigh-Durham. It's about a 10,000 member congregation, and one of the things that we've seen is that's been beautiful is the small, medium, and large business owners that have gotten involved specifically in this. We recently had a large business owner that ended up so impacted by his work with immigrants in the area that he purchased 200 apartments for them to live in. It was amazing. But we're seeing this catch, but one of the things that I'm curious from your perspective as business owners and business leaders in your community. What are ways that the church specifically can engage with other business leaders? What are ways that you have worked with fellow business leaders to bring them into this conversation that you found to be constructive? How do we mobilize our business leaders in our church to care about this?
Do you want to start?
Thanks.
Good question. You know, I think that you appeal, you know, as a church and a leader in the community, a faith leader in the community, I think that's where you make your appeal. I think most people have a level of faith. You know, we have different religions and different beliefs, but I think most people have a level of faith in their lives. And I think it's a matter of starting just knocking on doors and maybe you starting to build those alliances just almost, I wouldn't say randomly, but any organization, any entity that looks like it might be able to have an impact or be able to partner with you, do that. We've partnered with it's called the Community Council of Idaho. It's a migrant I can't say the word well, advocacy.
Advocacy?
Yes, right. And we support them financially. And so we don't have the expertise to do that ourselves, but we form a partnership with them at their request. And then they can do the work for us and be kind of our voice. I know we got an award from the Hispanic Council of Idaho, something like that, for being advocates of the Hispanic population in Idaho. But those things, it's almost one leads to the next. Once you can start one, and you get them on board with you, it almost starts to maybe build a critical mass. I mean, it's not that tangible maybe, but you start to gain credibility, and you can say, hey, we're partnering with this and these organizations here. Would you like to come on board? Here's what we're doing. Here's what we'd like to do. But yeah, you know, absolutely appeal. And even if you're not a religious organization, I still think you can make an appeal to somebody's faith and somebody's morals that you know, we need to do this. Going back to what you asked about my cynical nature would say that that's probably what's going to happen. This is going to go on for a while. It may well get worse. But sadly, I think the problem will get fixed whenever it hurts enough people economically, because then everybody will jump into gear and they'll fix it. But it would be really sad if we had to get to that point. It'd be much better to fix this with our heart and through our faith and through our moral conscience, I guess. But anyway, you guys probably have way better suggestions.
Someone has a flight to catch. So
sorry.
I want to thank the panelists for taking the time to come here and the audience for your very thoughtful questions. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.